Just quick things before we get started. All right, so the last thing we're doing in Reading the World is this Terry Tempest Williams essay, Clan of the One-Breasted Women. Remember to do the vocab stuff, and remember tonight to submit reflection paper 7, right? And then you'll have one more reflection paper to do after the break. But you should already be thinking about which text we've looked at you want to do your longer paper about, and maybe get a head start on the annotated bibliography. So we're going to do a more detailed dive into how to do research after the break. But just to help everybody get started here, I just want to show you some quick stuff about how to most effectively use Galileo, and how to get a couple of articles so that you don't feel overwhelmed right when the time comes here. So I'm going to admit that the new website design confuses the shit out of me, and I'm not really a fan of the pop-up tabs, but yeah, I'll just show you how to get to where you need to get to and how to request an article if we can't access it directly from here, right? Okay. So first thing you're going to want to do, go to the Academics tab on the GSW homepage and scroll down to Library. Simple enough, right? Now the first place you're going to want to visit is Galileo. So Galileo is essentially every database that the University System of Georgia libraries subscribe to, right? So, there are articles, there are databases full of links to articles, or even just links to titles in a lot of cases, right? And if you try to search all of Galileo, what you're going to get is a lot of static, right? You will probably get some things that are relevant to what you're looking for, but you're also going to have to filter through a lot of noise. So in order to avoid doing that, it's best to use more specific databases. Right? So if you click on Search by Subject and you go to Literature and Writing, right, scroll down to the MLA International Bibliography. So this will give you stuff that is specifically related to literature studies, textual studies, things like that, right? And what you're going to want to do in order to do your search, right, you're going to want to start with keywords that are as specific as possible, right? So say that you want to write about the Audre Lorde essay, like you do your paper on that. And what you're interested in is the way she relates, the idea of silence to the idea of disease, right, or the idea of cancer. So I'd make my search terms for this Audre Lorde and silence and cancer. Does everybody know why I phrased it this way, why I put these terms in quotation marks and linked them with an all capitalized A and D?
I was going to ask why didn't you just put like the title of her thing and then her name?
Well, because that would be long. This is a little bit shorter, will probably get me most of the same stuff. But essentially what I'm doing with the quotation marks and the ands, right? The quotation marks mean that I'm only searching for documents that include these specific words in this combination, right? And the ands, capitalized, mean that I am searching only for documents that contain all three of these terms. All right, so let's see what this search gives us. Okay, it gives us 3 articles, right? That's actually not too bad, right? That's actually a reasonable number of things to sift through, especially because once we've got one of these, what can we do? do we necessarily need to go back to the database to get a bunch of more sources? Yeah, we can just work backwards from the source we have, right? So let's see. So this one's Lester C. Olson on the margins of rhetoric. Audre Lorde transforming silence into action. Okay. That actually sounds like it might be helpful. So sometimes there will be a link directly to a PDF or to an HTML document that you can click on and just access the article. That's only in the cases, though, of articles that are in journals that our library actually subscribes to. Apparently, the Quarterly Journal of Speech is not one of those. However, you can still get this article pretty easily, right? So if we go back to the library webpage, click on Tipasa. Tipasa is an interlibrary loan service. So it's how we get books or articles that aren't available in any library in the university system, right? So when you first log in, it looks kind of like this. These are all articles that I have requested for various, like either for research that I'm doing or to prep for classes that I'm teaching, things like that. And they'll give you 5 free views of the PDF, but you're often better off just opening the PDF, downloading it to your desktop, and keeping it, right? And then you don't have to keep coming back to this. Okay, so to request the article, you're going to want to click on Create Request. And okay, yeah, this is an article that we want. You can also request books or chapters of books, but we'll go into more detail with that when we do our research day. All right, so the journal title here is the Quarterly Journal of Speech. And the date we see here is November 2005. Now, for some reason, they require you to tell them where you learned about this item. I don't really understand why, and I think it's stupid, so I usually just put in something that makes me sound crazy. So let's go with something like Demonic Whispers on the Wings of Time. All right, that'll leave them scratching their heads. All right, now the volume number is going to be this number right here after the date, typically, right? So in this case, it's volume 83. Even the information you don't have to give them that doesn't have the asterisk next to it, you usually want to give them because it'll help them find it faster. Issue number will usually be in parentheses after the volume number if it has an issue number, some don't. Page numbers, 49 to 70. The title of the article, you can usually just copy and paste. The author of the article is Lester C. Olson. And then you'll have to tell them when you want it by. So let's say I want it by the end of next week. And then if I actually wanted this, I would have to give them my patron ID and click on Submit Request. And then usually you'll get the article within 48 hours, right? The turnaround is usually pretty fast. So when you put in the request, they'll send you an email that'll give you, they'll either tell you to go check Tipasa and it'll show you the page like the one we started on, or that it'll give you a direct link you can click on. The link doesn't always work though, so the best thing to do is usually just go right to Tipasa. Yes, Brandon?
Are we gonna have a writing day in class where we can continue to do all this and if you fill out like we did last time?
We will have a writing day in class, yeah. So yeah, our last day of class will be a chance for you guys to work on a draft. The annotated bibliography y'all will be doing outside of class though. But yeah, we will do a research day, and I am happy to help you with anything you need as regards to the research, right?
When is our last day of class?
our last day of class is going to be, I think,
It's not like the first week of December.
it's
Like
yeah.
the
I think
sixth.
it's the first Tuesday in December is our last day of class.
First day of December?
No, the first Tuesday.
Oh.
The first Tuesday of December is our last day of class. Because I think we don't have class on Thursday of that last week. All right, so does anybody have other questions about this? Okay, so this should give you enough to get started on doing some research, right? Once you've got a kind of general topic picked, right? And one thing to remember, again, when you're doing your search with, for the keywords in the database, right? Start specific, and if the specific keywords don't turn up enough, then start getting more broad, right? Okay. So if there be no further questions, then let's start talking about Audre Lorde. So I want to start this with a question for y'all. And look, this is not going to seem immediately relevant, but as we talk, the relevance of this I hope will become clear. Can somebody give me a quick list of federal holidays? Right, days that the government has kind of designated when everything shuts down, everything's closed.
Thanksgiving.
Okay.
Christmas,
Yeah, Thanksgiving and Christmas, okay.
Easter.
Easter, okay, yeah. Easter, at least Easter Monday, right? Because Easter itself is always on a Sunday, so
Yeah.
we have Sundays off anyway. I heard somebody say something else. Do we actually get Veterans Day off, though?
It is a federal holiday.
It is a federal holiday, right? But I'm talking about specifically ones like where the government closes down, where everything shuts
They
down.
not shut down on Veterans Day.
Nope.
No.
But
Thanksgiving. I
Do-
think
it-
Thanksgiving and Easter Monday and Christmas.
does shut down on Memorial Day, though, right?
Yeah.
What about July the 4th?
Yeah, July 4th,
Forgot about
Memorial Day.
Are they on New Year's? Are they
that.
open?
New Year's Eve? Or New Year's Day?
New Year's Day, yeah.
New Year's Day, okay.
Is there another one in January? Federal holiday?
Martin Luther King.
Yeah, MLK Day, yep.
No day.
They not shut on President's Day?
Typically not, at least not anymore. Although, yeah, President's Day seems to be mostly an excuse to have department store and automobile sales, right? But I want you to to look at this list, and I want you to think about which two things are the odd ones out here. There are two items on this list that aren't like the others.
Easter and Christmas.
Easter and Christmas.
Yeah, good. And how are these different from all of the others?
Religious.
Yeah, these are specific religious holidays, right? Right, they are federal holidays. They're declared federal holidays, but they are also religious holidays. And this is something that most of us don't really think about that much, right? We don't really think about this that often. Because we don't really have to, right? If you grow up in this country and you are, you are a practitioner of the majority religion or are raised in the majority religion, then your religious holidays are automatically a day off. But what if you're Jewish and you need the day off for Yom Kippur? What if you're a Muslim and you need the day off for Eid al-Fitr, right?
Hanukkah.
Well, no, Hanukkah is actually 7 days and nights. and nobody's going to give you the whole week off, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying.
But yeah, similar thing with like I think the most important Muslim holiday is Ramadan, but that's also a whole week, right? It's usually just kind of marked by people fasting, right? But if you are if you're Hindu and you celebrate Diwali, right?
That just happened like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah. Diwali was not that long ago. It was mid-November, I think.
Yeah.
Or early November this year. It's on a lunar calendar, so. But yeah, so you don't get your holiday off automatically, right? If you don't follow the majority religion, you usually have to take a personal day or something. Like for example, when my wife was in high school, my wife is Jewish, and they always had to take a day off for Yom Kippur. And she actually had a teacher once accuse her of just wanting to go to the mall and hang out and eat pizza all day, which is particularly offensive, given that it is the holiest day of the Jewish year, right? And what you do is sit in the synagogue all day and fast, right? You're not going to the mall eating pizza. But the point I'm trying to make here, right, is that if you are part of the majority religious population, right, then your particular religious preferences are already catered to and are never questioned, right?
Yeah.
And the same thing goes for a lot of other aspects of our lives. So, if I were, say, to go ahead and break down the various kind of like pieces of, say, my own identity, right? Okay, the most obvious physical things about me are that, I'm a white man in early middle age. All right, I'm 43. All right, I'm an educator. I have a PhD. I was raised Methodist, but no longer practice. My parents were working class. Right, my dad was a pipe fitter at the nuclear power plant. My mother worked as a secretary for the agricultural service.
What about your family? Like a normal.
Yeah, mother's family was dairy farmers.
Yeah.
My father's family were plumbers.
Yeah, like normal
Yeah,
family type stuff.
yeah. So I'm the first person in my family to have this level of education. I grew up in a relatively rural area. We were not affluent, but we were reasonably comfortable. Right? I'm able-bodied. I have no physical disabilities. And the reason that I lay all this out here is because identity is a much more complex thing than any single surface element of our personalities, right? Or any single surface element of our appearance. And all of these different identities affect the way that I interact with the world and the way the world treats me and interacts with me, right? Some of these identities give me advantages in particular situations. Others might give me disadvantages in particular situations and when dealing with particular people, right? So, to give you an example of how this works, when I was 15, I was walking around a friend's neighborhood on Halloween. There were about 10 of us. We were there for a party, and we got bored and we left Phil's basement and just started wandering the neighborhood, right? There was a cop stationed, I guess he was on, toilet paper and silly string patrol that night, right? And he was pissed about it, and he had kind of a sour attitude. And he made some kind of comment about us being, despite the fact that we were, not wearing costumes and not knocking on people's doors or really doing anything but walking. He made some kind of comment about us being too old for trick-or-treating. So my friend Eddie, because we're 15 and we're stupid, gives him the finger. And we keep walking. The cop grabs Eddie and pushes him against the car. Now, this particular group of kids I was in, right? We all went to the same private high school. Most of my friends were doctors and lawyers' kids. There were a couple of us, myself included, who were scholarship kids. And I might have been one of the scholarship kids, but I knew what my rights were. And so I got into the cop's face and told him that he hadn't actually broken the law, right? There was nothing you could detain him for. And the cop just told me to shut up and that I was going to be next. And then when he searched Eddie and let him go, right, nothing happened. Now the group that I was walking around with, I said there were about 10 of us. 6 of us were white. 3 were Asian. 1 was Latina but looked white. And the cop was, the cop was threatening, right? The cop was a dick. But ultimately nothing happened to us, right? Now, how might this interaction have gone differently if we'd been a group of predominantly black or predominantly Latino kids wandering around a white neighborhood in the Pennsylvania suburbs? I mean, even think about how we interacted with the cops, right? Why did Eddie feel like it was okay to give him the finger? Why did I feel like it was okay to get in the cop's face, right? Because on some level, we knew nothing was going to happen to us. We hadn't broken any laws. We weren't really going to get in any trouble. But if certain elements of our identity had been different, that cop probably would have treated us very, very differently, right, with a lot less deference. Because it was clear this was a guy who didn't mind roughing up 15-year-olds regardless, right? So, the point that I'm trying to make here, or the principle I'm trying to illustrate, is what is called by sociologists and legal scholars intersectionality. Right. So this is a term that was coined in 1989 by a legal scholar. I don't know why I can't talk today. By the name of Kimberly Crenshaw. And Crenshaw's basic insight is that consideration of personal identity in terms of, say, one single racial or class identity actually does very little to describe how we interact with the world and how the world treats us in response to us. Right? That in fact, identity is a multifaceted and multi-layered thing. And a person who has identities that are at advantage in some situations is going to be at a disadvantage in others, right? So the basic idea is to try to think about how different aspects of our identities empower or disempower us. So, for example, in my professional life, right, I am an educator with a PhD, but there aren't really that many PhDs for a variety of reasons who come from working class backgrounds. You know, the job you get at the other end of a PhD doesn't pay that well, and you have to spend a lot of years in school making little or no money and taking out loans in order to get to this point, right? So this is a profession that is harder to get into if you're working class, and that also tends to be generational, right? If your parents had already been through this process, or if other people in your family had,
They have the money to help pay for it.
not only that, but they also know the social codes, right? They know how you're supposed to behave. They know the kind of unwritten language, right? If you don't mind my asking here, like, how many of you are first generation college students? Oh, none of you is the first in your family to go to college. Okay. So you've all got, and you know, I wasn't the first in my family to go to college, right? My dad was a pipe fitter, but he had a BA. But I was the first in my family to go to graduate school, which is a different realm altogether, right? But that's good that everybody here, like, you've got somebody who knows, you know, at least how the basic process works, right? What I would like for you all to do for a moment, before we start delving into the Audre Lorde essay, I want you all to take a minute and just think about yourselves in these terms, right? And just make a list of the different identity categories that you occupy. Yeah, Chris.
You want us to write them down like you did, basically?
Write them down for yourself, yeah. I'm not going to ask you to share them, right? That's personal. But I do want you to write these down, think about it, right? And if there are other, you know, like categories that are important to you that I didn't list, you know, for example, I can, you know, maybe put up here as well, you know, okay, I'm a citizen, right, and, you know, my political affiliation, right, European-style social democrat, something we don't really have a party for here. Has everybody got a list to work with? Okay, so I'm going to put a set of questions up here on the projector. And I want you to think about how you would answer them. So the first thing I want you to try to think about is the part of your identity that you're most aware of on a daily basis. What part of your identity are you most aware of on a daily basis? Now, what part of your identity are you least aware of on a daily basis, right? What part of your identity do you think about the least? What part of your identity was most emphasized or important in your family when you were growing up? And you can, by the way, you can answer these however you like, right? You can use the same category, use the same answer for different questions. The part of your identity you wish to know more about, right? Is there a certain part of your identity that you feel you haven't really explored sufficiently? What's the part of your identity that provides you with the most privilege? What part of your identity do you think is most misunderstood by other people? What part of your identity do you feel is most difficult to discuss with those who identify differently? Like, what's the hardest part of your identity to talk about with other people? Especially if they're not part of the same in-group. And is there any part of your identity that makes you feel discriminated against? That makes you feel like people judge you for it unfairly. Okay, so what I'd like you to do now, and again, I don't expect anyone to read out their answers to these questions, right? Because this is personal. But I do want you to just take maybe 7 minutes and just write a brief reflection on the process here, right? On what we've just done. And whether or not looking at yourself in terms of different categories of identity has made you see yourself differently at all, or has made you consider how others might see you. 2 more minutes. Okay, so that's time. So first off, I just want to say here that I don't expect any of you to necessarily share what y'all wrote. I know that like a lot of this, again, feels more personal than a lot of the kind of stuff we usually do. And believe me, I come from a Scottish Protestant background, so the only thing that makes us more uncomfortable than actually feeling feelings is talking about feelings, right?
Especially when they ask you, like, give your testimony or something.
What's that?
Especially like when they ask you, like, give your testimony or something.
Uh-huh. Yeah, to tell your personal story, right? Yeah. And so, if any of you want to share what you wrote, you are welcome to do so now. If you do not want to share what you wrote, if you'd rather keep it to yourself, that is also okay.
I mean, if you want somebody to, it will.
Only if you're comfortable with it.
Yeah.
Okay, go for it.
People may look at me and not think too much of me. I bet they see dirty clothes, me looking tired and out of it, maybe sometimes stressed out. It's because of how hard I push myself. I'm very strong, working full time on college is a hard thing to do while also being someone people look up to for advice, encouragement, and strength. However, I'm happy to be who I am and give it all to my folks. I would not be who I am without my dad. He instilled in me the strength and wisdom it takes to stand out as a young man. Even though it was hard on me growing up and I hated him a lot for being so tough on me, I now see why and couldn't be more thankful for his guidance. That's this one.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else?
Okay, so I haven't often thought about some different categories that were mentioned before this exercise. I had never even thought about being able-bodied my whole life.
Working in this building makes you think a lot about it, particularly before they build the elevator.
Able-bodied doesn't have to be like working. It comes to as simple as climbing a flight of stairs.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I had never thought to put myself in that category like that.
Uh-huh.
And also the questions you asked sometimes made me think thoughts that I almost find shameful.
Okay.
And these questions caused me to question my own identity in some aspects. Why do I think certain things? What is my experience? I guess have to do with it.
Yeah, and I do want to say that my intent here was not to make anybody feel ashamed or guilty about anything, right? What I am trying to do here, by and large, is illustrate a point about Audre Lorde's process and about the basic argument that she's making, right? And the kind of the ideological currents that her work fits into. And I think that if we understand all of this, it helps us better understand a lot of what the arguments she's making are. So I mean, like, if this does prompt, a little soul searching on all of our parts, I think that's overall a good thing. I think it is actually kind of good to sit back and take stock now and again of who we are and where we are. But yeah, I really, really hope that no one was profoundly upset by this. Okay, so let's actually try to get into the Audre Lorde essay now. And I think where I want to make the connection here, right, is with the whole idea of silence and the way she relates it to disease, right? So if we look on page 155, can I get somebody to read the paragraph there that starts with, "And of course I am afraid"?
And of course I am afraid because the transformation of silence into language and action is an act of self-revelation, and that always seems fraught with danger. But my daughter, when I told her of our topic and my difficulty with it, said, "Tell them about how you're never really a whole person if you remain silent, because there's always that one little piece inside you that wants to be spoken out. And if you keep ignoring it, it gets madder and madder and hotter and hotter. And if you don't speak it out one day, it will just up and punch you in the mouth from the inside."
Okay, so the daughter's comment here, right, is about the dangers of silence, right? And what happens if you keep things kind of within yourself just festering, right? And if we look at the way the daughter describes the consequences of this, what does it kind of look like? Tell them about how you're never really a whole person if you remain silent, because there's always that one little piece inside you that wants to be spoken out, and if you keep ignoring it, it gets madder and madder and hotter and hotter, and if you don't speak it out, one day it will just up and punch you in the mouth from the inside. What's going on there?
Kind of like cancer.
Okay, yeah, how is it like cancer?
If you don't say something about it, it'll tear you apart basically.
Yeah. And what, like, if we think about, like, what cancer is, right? Like, literally, what is cancer? What happens?
Virus spreads through your body and kills other cells.
Well, cancer actually isn't usually started by a virus, right?
It's what's it called?
We literally talked about this today in
It's
biology.
mutation.
Yeah, it's a mutation in your own cells, right? So your own body turns against itself, right? Your own cells start attacking each other, right? So the idea is, like, your body attacking itself from the inside, right? And this is what that silence in the daughter's metaphor is like, right? That these things that you hold in, these things you don't express, right, come back to harm you later on, right? Like, they actually make you sick. So let's go back to the beginning of the essay to try to pull out the whole situation to which this metaphor is relevant, right? And what prompted really kind of the whole argument she's making in the first place, right? So can I get somebody to start reading from page 154? Just first paragraph.
I have come to believe over and over again that what is most important to me must be spoken, made verbal and shared, even at the risk of having it bruised or misunderstood. That the speaking profits me beyond any other effect. I am standing here as a black lesbian poet, and the meaning of all that waits upon the fact that I am still alive, and might not have been. Less than 2 months ago, I was told by 2 doctors, one female and one male, that I would have to have breast surgery, and that there was a 60 to 80% chance that the tumor was malignant. Between that telling and the actual surgery, there was a 3-week period of the agony of an involuntary reorganization of my entire life. The surgery was completed and the growth was benign.
Okay, thank you. So, what 3 elements of Lorde's identity first do we get in this paragraph?
She's a woman.
Okay, woman.
Yeah. She's African American and she's a lesbian poet. I mean, I guess you could split those 2 up.
Yes, those are separate things, yes. And what else is she?
Sick.
Yeah, she's a cancer survivor as well, right? Now we also know, because we've looked at another portion of this where she discusses her daughter, right, that she is also a mother. So over the course of this relatively short essay, right, these 6 identities and others are what's driving, an expression of these identities is what's driving her argument forward, right? You know, trying to speak to her experiences as a black woman, lesbian, poet, cancer survivor, mother, right? So, she gets the diagnosis here, right? And then there's a 3-week period of the agony of an involuntary reorganization of my entire life. Right? So what does this diagnosis do to her? Let's focus on a couple of key words here. What about the word involuntary?
She didn't ask for it.
She didn't ask for this, right? And yeah, so the reorganization of her life that occurs as a result of this, right, is something that is forced, right? So her relationship to this is passive. There's nothing she can do about it. And she also describes this as agony, right? What's agony?
Pain.
Yeah, and not just pain, right? Like intense, nearly unbearable pain, right? Right, intense pain as a result of being forced to reorder her entire life with the expectation that she has a malignant tumor, right? Can I get somebody to continue here but within those 3 weeks? Anybody, I don't care who.
But within those 3 weeks,
Thank
I
you,
was
Sydney.
forced to look upon myself and my living with a harsh and urgent clarity that has left me still shaken but much stronger. This is a situation faced by many women, but some of you here today, some of what I experienced during that time has helped
Elucidate.
Elucidate.
Make clear. Yeah.
elucidate for me much of what I feel concerning the transformation of silence into language and action.
Okay, so what does the diagnosis prompt her to do? what's the positive result that she pulls out of this? What's it lead to?
This writing.
What's that?
This writing.
Okay, this writing for one thing. Yeah, this is a tangible result of that, right? Right, so in transforming these negative feelings into language, right? In acting upon those feelings through speech and writing, rather than simply bottling them up, right? This helps her with the process of self-examination, right? To help her figure out where her values really lie, right? What's important, right? In becoming forcibly and essentially aware of my mortality and of what I wished and wanted for my life, however short it might be, priorities and omissions became strongly etched in a merciless light, and what I most regretted were my silences. Of what had I ever been afraid? To question or to speak as I believed could have meant pain or death, but we all hurt in so many different ways, all the time, and pain will either change or end. Death, on the other hand, is the final silence, and that might be coming quickly now, without regard for whether I had ever spoken what needed to be said, or had only betrayed myself into small silences. While I planned someday to speak, or waited for someone else's words, and I began to recognize a source of power within myself that comes from the knowledge that while it is most desirable not to be afraid, learning to put fear into a perspective gave me great strength. So let's unpack this a little bit here, right? So how does awareness of mortality help her, if not to be less afraid, then at the very least to deal with her fear?
Can you ask the question? Say it again.
So how does awareness of her own mortality help her to deal with her fear?
She puts it in perspective.
Okay. And what's that perspective look like? What's the new angle that she develops on this?
Kind of gives her like, I don't know the right word, but like kind of kicks her off into like doing what she's always wanted to do, and so it gives her a reason to do it. She's
Okay.
on like a limited time frame.
Yeah, okay, so mortality is really kind of like the ultimate limitation, right? This is the limitation that none of us can transcend. And this is something that, she addresses here, so that pain is temporary, right? The pain that she feared from speaking out will pass, but death is permanent, right? There's no way out of it. It's permanent and inevitable. So if she fails to speak out about something, to speak about something because she fears pain, right? If she waits too long, then she will never have a chance to speak, right? It'll never come out. And as we note from what her daughter says, right, that holding the thing in causes its own kind of pain. So have any of you ever been in a situation where you felt like in the moment you should have said something? Whether, maybe, a friend, made a joke that you felt was inappropriate, and you was like, well, I should say something, but I don't want to jeopardize the friendship, right? Or, even just something as banal as wow, You know, I really like that person there. I should ask them out. No, they'd never like me. I'm just going to go walk away. So you cause yourself more pain, you know, that pain of regret, by not speaking up when you feel you should have, right? And I think that we can relate a lot of what she says here about waiting to Martin Luther King's rhetoric in the letter from Birmingham jail, right? If we think back to that, if we think back to King, what happens to people who are content to wait? Does the thing you're waiting for ever come? As long as you show, in King's argument, right, that you're content to wait, people will let you wait forever.
I thought you were going to use the analogy of rejection. Outright rejection hurts more than.
Pardon?
I thought you were going to use the analogy of outright rejection and lukewarm reception. You know.
Okay.
The idea that it might hurt more if you. It might hurt less if you speak out than if you don't say anything.
Okay. And yeah, I guess, and yeah, that could also, like, yeah, refer to treatment of disease, right? You know, this, you know, does your body accept the transplant or reject it? But yeah, so a lot of what's going on here, right, is this association of, like, she's associating particular ideas and words with each other, right? So we've got, you know, death and mortality associated with, right, with passivity, with silence, with inaction, right? Pardon?
I was going to say silence with pain,
Yeah.
but same thing too.
And yeah, also with pain and illness. And language and action are directly associated with each other, right? That speaking or writing and action seem to amount to something like the same thing, right? That speaking is in and of itself an action. Right, you put something into language, you put something you're feeling or thinking into language, and you've performed an action in the world, right? And to illustrate, I want to look on page 155 here. The first full paragraph at the top of the page there, right? What are the words you do not yet have? What do you need to say? What are the tyrannies you swallow day by day and attempt to make your own, until you sicken and die of them, still in silence? Perhaps for some of you here today, I am the face of one of your fears. Because I am woman, because I am black, because I am lesbian, because I am myself, a black woman warrior poet doing my work, come to ask you, are you doing yours? And of course, this actually is not the part that I meant to quote. The part that I meant to quote is the part right above it. You know, when she says, I am not only a casualty, I am also a warrior, right? What does that mean? I am not only a casualty, I am also a warrior.
What does that mean?
Yeah, what does that mean? Let's try to pick this apart a little bit. I am not only a casualty, I am also a warrior.
Casualty could be meaning about how when she was diagnosed, she could have just gave up then, but she used that and turned it into something. Where she actually spoke up about it, and with that like paragraph that you just read, it's kind of like she's trying to call out the people that were in the place where she was, still being silent. So.
Okay.
All of us die, but only some of us act as warriors.
Okay. So yeah, so a casualty in war is not necessarily a warrior, right? There are civilian casualties too, right? People who are just collateral damage. And what's the difference between between a casualty of war who's a civilian and one who's a warrior?
The warrior did like the work.
yeah, the warrior was actively involved in the fight, right? The civilian casualty is just passively injured by accident, right? So, this may seem an insensitive analogy to people who have lived in war zones, right? But, yeah, the idea of being a warrior, right? Right, the warrior is active. The mere casualty is passive. Right? Even if I'm injured, even if I'm hurt, at least I was hurt in the fight, right? And not as a bystander. Okay, so we're a little short on time here, but I think the thing that I really want to pull out of this here is what all of this speech and action is supposed to lead to, right? What it's supposed to accomplish. So if you look at the bottom of 154, can I get somebody to start reading the paragraph that starts with, "I was going to die if not sooner than later."
I was going to die, if not sooner than later, whether or not I had ever spoken myself. My silences had not protected me. Your silences will not protect you. But for every real word spoken, for every attempt I had ever made to speak those truths for which I am still seeking, I had made contact with other women while we examined the words to fit a world in which we all believe, bridging our differences. And it was the concern and caring of all those women which gave me strength and enabled me to scrutinize the essentials of my living.
Keep going.
The women who sustained me through that period were black and white, old and young, lesbian, bisexual, and heterosexual, and we all shared a war against the tyrannies of silence. They all gave me a strength and concern without which I could not have survived intact. Within those weeks of acute fear came the knowledge. Within the war we are all waging with the forces of death, subtle and otherwise, conscious or not, I am not only a casualty, I am also a warrior.
Okay, so now I want to draw your attention down to the bottom of the page where she's talking about the holiday of Kwanzaa and the three principles of the 3 days that she has so far celebrated, right? So, Umoja, unity. Oh, shut up. Kuji, Chagalia, or self-determination. And the third, Ujima, collective work and responsibility. So what does all this add up to? Like, why did I want to cite these three principles after she talks about using language to bridge differences and to share experiences? What is the basic, what does she seem to be aiming for in the essay? What's she trying to build through language?
Unity?
Yes, in particular, if we had to kind of come to the beginning of that, right? Yeah, it seems like she's trying to use the idea of, she's trying to use language and speech to build a supportive community, right? Which can provide a kind of safety net for one's self-determination, right? Okay, so we're about out of time here. Let me give you the reading questions for next time. This is the last thing you're going to have to read in Reading the World. And then you may go.